I stood in the center of the hotel ballroom, frozen, as my ex-husband Marcus raised his champagne glass and announced to everyone at our 20-year high school reunion that I was the biggest mistake of his life. The entire room went silent. He smiled that cruel, confident smile I used to love, the one that now made my stomach twist, and continued speaking as if I weren't standing 10 feet away from him. I wasted 7 years married to a woman who couldn't even give me a child. 7 years with someone who worked at a bakery while I built an empire. Thank God I woke up and found someone worthy of the life I created. His new wife, Vanessa, clung to his arm like a designer accessory, her diamond necklace catching the light as she whispered something in his ear and laughed. They both laughed, and then others joined in. Nervous chuckles rippling through the crowd of people I'd grown up with. People who knew me. People who were now watching me like I was some kind of public spectacle. I felt my face burning, my hands shaking at my sides. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I just stood there because 3 years ago when Marcus divorced me, he didn't just leave. He destroyed me. He took everything. The house we built together. The savings account I'd contributed to for years. Even my confidence. He'd left me with nothing but debt and a crushing sense of failure. And he'd done it all with a smile on his face and a lawyer who made sure I walked away with barely enough to survive. Now here he was, standing in front of everyone we'd ever known, making sure they all understood that I was beneath him, that I'd always been beneath him. "Julia," he said, turning to face me directly now, his voice dripping with false concern. "I hope you're doing well. I really do. I heard you're still working at that little bakery on 5th Street. That's sweet. Really. It takes a special kind of person to be satisfied with so little." Vanessa giggled again, covering her mouth with perfectly manicured fingers. Someone behind me whispered to their companion. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard the tone. Pity, judgment, disgust. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough that only I and a few people nearby could hear. "You should have signed the prenup without fighting me, Julia. You should have known your place. But you always did think you were more important than you actually were." That was when I felt it. A hand, warm and steady, resting gently on the small of my back. "I'm sorry I'm late, darling." The voice was deep, calm, and unfamiliar. I turned, confused, and found myself looking up at a man I'd never seen before in my life. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my rent, with dark eyes that held a strange mixture of warmth and quiet authority. He smiled at me like we'd known each other forever. "Traffic was worse than I expected," he continued smoothly, his hand still resting on my back. "I hope I didn't miss anything important." Marcus's expression shifted. The smug confidence faltered just slightly. "I'm sorry, who are you?" The stranger extended his free hand. "Daniel Ashford, Julia's husband." The room, which had already been quiet, went completely silent. Marcus stared at the outstretched hand like it was a snake. "Husband? Julia, what is this? Some kind of joke?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I had no idea what was happening. This man, Daniel, was a complete stranger. I'd never seen him before in my life. But he was standing here, claiming to be my husband. And something about the way he carried himself made it impossible to dismiss him as some random person playing a prank. Daniel smiled again, this time at Marcus. "No joke. We've been married for 8 months now. Julia probably didn't mention it because, well, she doesn't feel the need to broadcast her personal life to people who don't matter to her anymore." Vanessa's grip on Marcus's arm tightened. She looked between Daniel and me, her expression shifting from amusement to confusion to something that looked almost like fear. Marcus recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "Husband? Right. And what exactly do you do, Daniel?" "I run a few companies," Daniel said casually, as if discussing the weather. "Tech, real estate, some venture capital investments. Nothing too exciting. Julia's the interesting one in our relationship. Her creativity, her kindness, the way she sees the world, that's worth more than any business deal I've ever closed." He looked down at me as he said it, and for a moment I forgot that this was all some bizarre, inexplicable lie. The way he looked at me made me feel like I mattered, like I was valuable, like I was seen. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Tech and real estate, that's vague." "Is it?" Daniel pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and handed it to Marcus. "That's my LinkedIn. Feel free to verify." Marcus took the phone, his eyes scanning the screen. I watched his face change. The color drained from his cheeks. His hand trembled slightly as he handed the phone back. "Daniel Ashford," Marcus repeated, his voice hollow now. "You're the Daniel Ashford? Ashford Technologies?" Daniel shrugged modestly. "Guilty." I didn't know who Daniel Ashford was, but clearly Marcus did. Clearly everyone in this room did, because suddenly people were pulling out their own phones, whispering frantically to each other, and staring at Daniel like he was some kind of celebrity. Vanessa's face had gone pale. She released Marcus's arm and took a small step back. Marcus tried to recover, forcing another laugh that sounded more like a cough. "Well, congratulations, Julia. I guess you traded up." "I didn't trade anything," Daniel said, his tone still friendly but with an edge now. "I won the lottery. Julia is the most remarkable woman I've ever met, but I'm sure you already knew that, which makes it all the more pathetic that you stood here trying to humiliate her in front of a room full of people." Marcus's face flushed red. "I wasn't—" "You were," Daniel interrupted gently. "But it's fine. People reveal who they really are when they think they're winning. You've certainly done that tonight." He turned to me, his expression softening. "Are you ready to leave, darling? I made reservations at Aurelio's for 8:30. Aurelio's. I'd heard of it. It was the kind of restaurant where you needed to book months in advance, where a single meal cost more than I made in a week. I nodded, still too stunned to form words. Daniel took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine, and guided me toward the exit. The crowd parted for us like water. I could feel everyone's eyes on my back, could hear the whispers starting already. As we reached the door, Daniel paused and turned back to Marcus one last time. "Oh, and Marcus, the donation you were planning to make to the reunion fundraiser? Don't bother. I've already covered it. Consider it a gift in Julia's name." We walked out into the cool night air, and I finally found my voice. "What the hell just happened?" Daniel released my hand and stepped back, giving me space. "I apologize for the deception, Julia. My name really is Daniel Ashford, and everything I said in there about my work is true. But we're not married. We've never met before tonight." I stared at him, my mind racing. "Then why did you—" "I was supposed to meet a colleague at the bar across the street," he explained. "I was early, so I stepped into the hotel to make a phone call. I overheard what that man was saying to you through the open ballroom doors. The way he was speaking to you, the way everyone was just letting it happen. It made me angry. So you just decided to pretend to be my husband?" He smiled almost sheepishly. "I'm not usually this impulsive, but I've been in rooms like that before. Rooms where powerful people think they can say or do whatever they want because no one will stop them. Someone needed to stop him, and I had the resources to make it convincing. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said quietly, "but I wanted to. No one deserves to be treated the way he treated you." We stood there in silence for a moment, the sound of traffic and distant conversations filling the space between us. "Aurelio's," I finally said. "Did you really make a reservation?" "I did," Daniel admitted, "right before we left the ballroom. I texted my assistant. It seemed like a waste to create an elaborate exit and then just send you home." "I can't afford Aurelio's." "My treat," he said immediately. "Think of it as an apology for involving you in my spontaneous act of vigilante justice. Plus, I'm genuinely curious to know more about the woman whose ex-husband is such a colossal idiot." I surprised myself by laughing. It was the first real laugh I'd had in months. "Fine, but I'm only agreeing because I want to hear how you ended up at my high school reunion pretending to be my husband." "Deal," Daniel said, offering his arm. I took it, and we walked toward his car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Marcus's house. As we drove through the city, Daniel asked me questions. Not the superficial small talk I'd expected, but real questions. How did I end up working at a bakery? What did I love about it? What did I want to do with my life if money and fear and past failures weren't factors? I found myself answering honestly, more honestly than I'd been with anyone in years. I told him about how I'd always wanted to open my own bakery, how Marcus had convinced me it was a stupid dream, how the divorce had left me so financially broken that I could barely afford to eat, let alone start a business. Daniel listened without interrupting, without offering empty platitudes or unsolicited advice. He just listened. When we arrived at Aurelio's, the staff treated Daniel like royalty. We were escorted to a private table near the window, overlooking the city lights. Over dinner, Daniel told me about himself, how he'd built his first company from nothing, how he'd failed multiple times before finding success, how he'd recently lost his mother and had been thinking a lot about legacy and what actually mattered in life. Money doesn't make you a good person, he said at one point, swirling his wine glass. Your ex-husband is proof of that. He has wealth, he has status, but he uses it to make himself feel superior instead of lifting others up. That kind of success is hollow. And what about your success, or I asked. He considered the question carefully. I'd like to think I use it responsibly. I try to invest in people and ideas that make the world better. But I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. I've prioritized profit over people more times than I'd like to admit. At least you're honest about it, I said. Honesty is all we really have, Daniel replied. That and the choice to do better tomorrow than we did today. As the evening went on, I realized I was enjoying myself, really enjoying myself. Daniel was intelligent, funny, self-aware, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. It had been so long since I'd felt like my thoughts and opinions mattered to someone. When the check came, Daniel paid without even glancing at the total. As we left the restaurant, he turned to me with a question I didn't expect. Julia, I know we just met, and this is going to sound insane, but would you be willing to meet with me again? Not as my fake wife, just as yourself. I'd like to continue this conversation. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to protect myself, to not let anyone get close, to avoid the possibility of being hurt again. But something about Daniel felt different, felt safe. Okay, I heard myself say. I'd like that. We exchanged phone numbers and Daniel drove me back to my apartment. As I got out of the car, he called after me. Julia, what he said tonight about you being a mistake? He's wrong. You're not a mistake. You're remarkable. Don't ever let anyone make you forget that. I went to bed that night replaying his words over and over in my mind. 3 days later, Daniel called and asked if I wanted to grab coffee. We met at a small cafe near my bakery, and we talked for 3 hours. He asked about my recipes, my favorite things to bake, the customers who made me smile. I asked about his companies, his vision for the future, what kept him up at night. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into a walk through the park. One meeting became 2, then 5, then 10. A month after the reunion, Daniel showed up at the bakery with a proposal. Not a marriage proposal, a business proposal. I want to invest in your dream, he said, laying a folder on the counter between us. I've done my research. I've talked to your boss, your customers, people in the industry. You have talent, Julia, real talent. And you have a vision. All you need is capital and support. I stared at the folder like it might explode. Daniel, I can't accept your money. It's not charity, he said firmly. It's an investment. I invest in businesses I believe in, and I believe in you. I'll be a silent partner. You'll have full creative control. If the business succeeds, we both profit. If it fails, the loss is mine alone. But I don't think it's going to fail. Why would you do this? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. You barely know me. I know enough, Daniel said. I know you're talented, hardworking, and resilient. I know you've been knocked down and got back up. I know you see the best in people, even when they don't deserve it. That's more than enough for me. I opened the folder. Inside was a detailed business plan, financial projections, and a proposed location for the bakery. A beautiful space in a trendy neighborhood that I'd walked past 100 times and dreamed about. I can't, I whispered. You can, Daniel said gently. You just have to choose to believe in yourself as much as I believe in you. I looked up at him, tears blurring my vision. What if I fail? Then you fail, he said with a shrug, and then you try again. Failure isn't the end, Julia. Giving up is. 2 months later, I signed the papers. 3 months after that, I opened the doors to my own bakery, Julia's Corner. Daniel kept his word. He was a silent partner, never interfering, never demanding control. He came by once a week to buy coffee and pastries, always insisting on paying full price, always leaving a generous tip. But something else was happening too. something neither of us had planned for. I was falling for him, and I was terrified. One evening after closing, I found Daniel waiting outside the bakery. "Can we talk?" he asked. We sat on the bench outside, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. "I need to tell you something," Daniel said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. "And I need you to be honest with me about how you feel." My heart pounded. "Okay, I didn't invest in your bakery just because I believed in your business," he said, staring at his hands. "I invested because I wanted a reason to stay in your life. I wanted to be part of your world. And I know that's manipulative and selfish. And I'm sorry if that changes how you see me." I sat there stunned. "The truth is, Julia, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night at the reunion. You're the first person in years who's made me feel like I'm more than my bank account or my business achievements. You see me, the real me, and I'm terrified of losing that." He finally looked up at me, his eyes vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "So I need to know, is there any part of you that feels the same way? Or am I just the guy who helped you start your bakery?" I didn't answer with words. I leaned forward and kissed him. When we finally pulled apart, Daniel was smiling. "I'm going to take that as a yes." "That's a yes," I confirmed, laughing through happy tears. We started dating officially after that. Daniel integrated into my life seamlessly, showing up at the bakery to help during rush hours, meeting my friends, supporting my goals without trying to control them. For the first time in years, I felt happy, truly happy. And then, 8 months later, Marcus showed up. I was behind the counter, boxing up an order, when I heard the bell above the door chime. I looked up and froze. Marcus stood in the doorway, looking older somehow, more tired. Vanessa wasn't with him. "Julia," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I glanced at my assistant, who nodded and took over the register. I led Marcus to a corner table, my stomach churning with anxiety and old familiar anger. "What do you want, Marcus?" He sat down heavily, like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. "I want to apologize." I laughed bitterly. "You're about 3 years too late for that." "I know," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I destroyed you, but I need you to hear this." I crossed my arms. "Fine. Talk." Marcus took a deep breath. "Vanessa left me. Took half of everything in the divorce, just like I did to you. Turns out she was only with me for the money. The second things got hard at work, the second I couldn't afford the lifestyle she wanted, she was gone." "And you want sympathy?" I asked coldly. "No," he said quickly. "I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did to you, how I made you feel, the way I humiliated you, belittled you, threw away 7 years like they meant nothing. I was cruel, Julia. I was wrong. And I'm sorry." I stared at him, waiting to feel something. Satisfaction, maybe. Vindication. But all I felt was empty. His apology didn't change what he'd done. It didn't erase the pain or the years I'd spent rebuilding myself. "I forgive you," I said finally, surprising myself. "Not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry anger toward you anymore. You don't get to take up space in my life, not even as someone I hate." Marcus nodded, tears in his eyes. "You deserve everything good that's come to you. Daniel, this place, all of it. You always deserved better than me." "I know," I said simply. He stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I saw the article about you two. The engagement announcement. He's a lucky man." After he left, I pulled out my phone and opened the news article Marcus had mentioned. It had been published that morning. Tech billionaire Daniel Ashford announces engagement to local entrepreneur Julia Chen. There was a photo of us from a charity event the week before. Daniel's arm around my waist, both of us smiling genuinely, happiness radiating from the image. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find Daniel walking into the bakery, carrying flowers. "I saw Marcus leave," he said carefully. "Are you okay?" "I'm perfect," I said honestly. Daniel set the flowers on the counter and pulled me into his arms. "Good. Because I have something to ask you." "You already proposed," I reminded him, laughing. "I said yes, remember?" "I know," Daniel said, "but I wanted to ask you something else. What do you think about expanding? Opening a second location? Maybe even franchising eventually?" I pulled back to look at him. "Are you serious?" Completely. You've built something incredible here, Julia. Something that brings joy to people every single day. Why not share it with more people? I thought about it. A year ago, I'd been broken, hopeless, convinced I'd never amount to anything. Now I was standing in my own successful bakery, engaged to a man who believed in me, discussing expansion plans. Let's do it, I said. Daniel grinned and kissed me. That's my girl. 6 months later, we opened a second location. A year after that, a third. And on a warm Saturday afternoon in June, I married Daniel in a small ceremony surrounded by friends, family, and regular customers from the bakery who'd become like family. As we danced at the reception, Daniel whispered in my ear, "Do you remember what I said that first night? That I won the lottery when I met you?" "I remember," I said. "I meant it then, and I mean it now," he said. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." I smiled up at him, thinking about how far I'd come. From that horrible night at the reunion, standing humiliated in front of everyone I'd ever known, to this moment, surrounded by love and possibility. "I used to think my life ended when Marcus left," I said softly. "But it didn't end. It just finally began." Daniel held me closer. "And we're just getting started." He was right. We were just getting started. And Marcus? I heard through mutual friends that he'd had to sell his company, that he was working a regular job now, living a regular life. Part of me felt sorry for him, but mostly I just felt grateful. Grateful that his betrayal had led me here. Grateful that his cruelty had forced me to rebuild. Grateful that his departure had made room for Daniel. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. You just have to survive long enough to see it. If you enjoyed this story of second chances and unexpected redemption, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Julia's position. Would you have forgiven Marcus, or would you have turned him away? And if you want more dramatic stories about people who got knocked down and found their way back up, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.